The scream that tore through the morning air on Maple Street wasn't just any scream. It was the kind that makes your blood freeze, the kind that tells you something terrible has just happened. I should know. I was the one who made it happen. My name is Victoria Sterling, and I'm about to tell you how I destroyed the two people I loved most in this world. But first, let me paint you the picture of that Tuesday morning at exactly 8:47 a.m., when my carefully planned revenge finally came to life. Natasha Brooks stood in her pristine white kitchen, still wearing her silk pajamas, holding a package that had just been delivered to her door. The return address was blank, just like I planned it. Her perfectly manicured fingers trembled as she tore open the brown wrapping paper, expecting maybe a late birthday gift or something from one of her real estate clients. What she found inside made her drop the box like it was on fire. The scream that followed wasn't human. It was pure terror, raw and desperate. The sound of someone whose entire world had just collapsed in a single moment. It started low, almost like a whimper, then built into something so loud and horrifying that Mrs. Patterson from next door dropped her coffee mug on her front porch. "Help! Somebody help me!" Natasha's voice cracked as she stumbled backward, knocking over her kitchen chair. The contents of the package scattered across her marble floor, and she couldn't stop staring at them, couldn't stop screaming. From my car parked across the street, I watched through my sunglasses as chaos erupted on the quiet suburban street. Mr. Johnson came running from his garden, still holding his watering hose. The young mother from 3 houses down rushed out with her baby still in her arms. Even old Mrs. Chen, who never left her house before noon, appeared on her front steps in her bathrobe. "What's wrong? What happened?" Voices called out as more neighbors gathered on Natasha's front lawn. But she couldn't answer them. She just kept screaming, pointing at her open front door like something evil was inside. Mrs. Patterson was the first to reach the door. "Honey, what's the matter? Are you hurt?" But when she looked inside and saw what was scattered across the kitchen floor, her face went white. She quickly stepped back, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. "We need to call the police," she whispered to Mr. Johnson, but her voice carried in the morning air. "And maybe an ambulance." The screaming continued for what felt like forever but was probably only 3 minutes. 3 minutes of pure, unfiltered terror that had the entire neighborhood in panic mode. Someone had already called 911, and I could hear sirens in the distance getting closer. Natasha finally collapsed onto her front steps, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Her perfect blonde hair was a mess, her silk pajamas wrinkled and stained with tears. She looked nothing like the confident, beautiful woman who had been stealing my husband for the past 8 months. "She's having some kind of breakdown," I heard Mr. Johnson tell someone on his phone. "I don't know what she saw, but it scared her real bad." If only he knew that the woman crying on those steps wasn't just some random neighbor having a bad day. If only any of them knew that Natasha Brooks was the same person who used to braid my hair in our college dorm room, who held me when I cried about my father's death, who promised at my wedding that she'd always be there for me. The same person who had been meeting my husband at expensive restaurants while I worked late nights to pay for what I thought were his business dinners. The same person who'd been wearing the jewelry I helped pick out, living in the apartment I helped her find, all while slowly destroying my marriage from the inside. As the ambulance pulled up and paramedics rushed toward Natasha, I started my car engine. My work here was done, at least for today. But this was just the beginning of the story. Just the first taste of what happens when you betray someone who trusted you with everything. You see, what those neighbors didn't know, what the paramedics couldn't understand, and what Natasha was too terrified to explain, was that the contents of that package weren't random. They were carefully chosen, specifically designed to target her deepest fears and darkest secrets. Secrets that only a best friend would know. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why Natasha Brooks screamed loud enough to wake the entire neighborhood, you need to know how we got here. You need to know about the perfect marriage that wasn't so perfect, about the friendship that was built on lies, and about the moment I discovered that the two people I loved most had been plotting against me all along. So let me take you back to where it all began, 3 months before that scream changed everything. 3 months before that scream echoed through Maple Street, I was living what everyone called the perfect life. At least, that's what I thought. It was a crisp October morning when I got the text that would change everything, though I didn't know it then. I was sitting in my corner office at Sterling Marketing, reviewing campaign proposals for our biggest client, when my phone buzzed with a message that made me smile for the first time in weeks. "Guess who's moving back to town?" Can't wait to catch up with my favorite married couple, Nat. Natasha. My college roommate, my maid of honor, my best friend who had moved to Chicago 8 years ago for her real estate career. I hadn't seen her in person since Thomas's promotion party 2 years back, though we texted regularly and video called every few weeks. I immediately called Thomas at his law firm. "You'll never guess who's moving back," I said, practically bouncing in my chair. "Who?" His voice sounded distracted, probably buried in case files. "Natasha. She's coming home. We should plan a welcome dinner, maybe at that Italian place she used to love." There was a pause. A weird, long pause that should have been my first warning sign. "That's great, honey. Really great. Listen, I'm in the middle of something. Can we talk about this tonight?" I hung up, brushing off his lukewarm response. Thomas had always been more reserved than me, less excited about social gatherings. It was just his personality. That evening, I practically attacked him with plans the moment he walked through our front door. Our house on Maple Street was everything we dreamed of when we got married 12 years ago. White picket fence, wraparound porch, the works. I'd spent hours that afternoon researching apartments for Natasha, restaurants for our reunion dinner, even planning a girls' weekend trip. "She's looking at places downtown," I told Thomas as he loosened his tie. "I found 3 perfect apartments in her price range, and I was thinking we could throw her a little welcome back party. Nothing fancy, just close friends." Thomas nodded, but something felt off. He kept checking his phone during dinner, claiming it was work emails. When I suggested we invite Natasha over for Sunday brunch that weekend, he said he had to work. "You've been working a lot of Sundays lately," I mentioned, trying to keep my voice light. "Big case coming up. You know how it is." I did know how it was. Thomas had always been ambitious, always pushing for the next promotion, the next big client. It's what made him successful, what paid for our beautiful house and comfortable life. I'd learned to accept the late nights, the weekend work sessions, the business dinners that seemed to happen more and more frequently. But lately, something felt different. Thomas seemed distant, distracted. When I tried to talk to him about my day, he'd give me half-hearted responses while scrolling through his phone. When I suggested we plan a vacation for our upcoming anniversary, he said he was too busy to think about it. I told myself it was just stress. The law firm was expanding, taking on bigger cases. Thomas was working toward becoming a partner. Of course, he was preoccupied. 2 weeks later, Natasha moved into a gorgeous downtown loft. I helped her unpack, just like old times, laughing as we discovered she still had some of our college photos tucked away in a box. "Look at us," she said, holding up a picture of the 3 of us from my engagement party. "We were so young." In the photo, Thomas had his arm around me while Natasha stood beside us, all of us grinning at the camera. We looked so happy, so innocent. Thomas looked at Natasha the same way he looked at everyone back then. Polite, friendly, nothing more. "I can't believe it's been 12 years since your wedding," Natasha continued. "You two still seem so happy together." "We are," I said automatically, though even as the words left my mouth, I wondered if they were still true. That night, I tried to talk to Thomas about my concerns. We were getting ready for bed, going through our usual routine that had become more mechanical than intimate over the past few months. "Do you think we're okay?" I asked, sitting on the edge of our bed. "What do you mean?" "I mean us. Our marriage. You seem so distant lately." Thomas paused in the middle of brushing his teeth. "I'm just stressed about work, Vic. You know that." "I know, but can we not do this tonight? I have an early meeting tomorrow." He climbed into bed and turned away from me, ending the conversation before it really began. I lay there in the dark, listening to his breathing, wondering when we'd stopped really talking to each other. If I'd known then what I know now, I would have paid more attention to the way Thomas's face changed when I mentioned Natasha's name. I would have noticed how he suddenly started working even more late nights after she moved back. I would have questioned why he seemed to know exactly which downtown area she was looking at for apartments. But I was still living in my perfect marriage facade, still believing that 12 years of love and trust meant something. I had no idea that my husband and my best friend were about to destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. The night my world shattered started like any other Tuesday evening in November. I was making Thomas's favorite dinner, grilled salmon with asparagus, while he claimed to be working late again. It had become our routine, me cooking for one, eating alone, saving him a plate that would sit in the fridge until morning. I'd been trying to reach him for an hour about weekend plans with Natasha, but his phone kept going straight to voicemail. Finally, around 8 o'clock, I decided to surprise him at the office with dinner. Maybe we could eat together for once, talk like we used to. The law firm's building was mostly dark when I arrived, just a few scattered lights in windows. Thomas's office was on the 7th floor, and I knew the security guard would let me up. I'd done this before during his genuinely busy periods. But when I reached his floor, his office was empty. Dark. His computer was off, his briefcase gone. "Excuse me," I asked the cleaning lady in the hallway. "Do you know if Thomas Sterling left already?" She looked confused. "Mr. Sterling? He left around 5:30, same as always. Haven't seen him work late in months." My stomach dropped. 5:30. He'd told me he'd be working until at least 9. I stood in that empty hallway, holding a container of salmon that was getting cold, trying to make sense of what I'd just learned. If Thomas wasn't working late, where was he? Where had he been all those other nights? My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and opened the Find My iPhone app. We'd shared our locations years ago for safety reasons, back when we trusted each other completely. The little dot that represented Thomas was moving slowly through downtown, nowhere near his office. I followed that dot like a woman possessed, driving through streets I knew by heart, my mind racing with possibilities. Maybe he was meeting a client. Maybe he was shopping for an anniversary surprise. Maybe there was a perfectly innocent explanation. The dot stopped moving at Rosario's, an upscale Italian restaurant we'd been to exactly once for our 5th anniversary. Too expensive for regular dinners, too romantic for business meetings. I parked across the street and sat in my car, staring at the warm light spilling from the restaurant windows. Part of me wanted to drive home, pretend I'd never followed him, go back to my comfortable denial. But I couldn't move. Then I saw him. Thomas walked out of the restaurant, and he wasn't alone. He had his arm around a woman with long blonde hair wearing a red dress I'd never seen before. They were laughing about something, completely absorbed in each other, and when they stopped beside his car, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. Not a friendly kiss. Not a business kiss. The kind of kiss that told me everything I needed to know about where my husband had been spending his evenings. But it wasn't until the woman turned toward the streetlight that my heart completely stopped beating. Natasha, my best friend, my maid of honor, the woman I'd helped find an apartment, the woman I'd been planning girls' nights with, the woman who'd been asking me about my marriage troubles and offering supportive advice. I watched in horror as Thomas opened the car door for her, his hand lingering on her lower back in a gesture so intimate it made me sick. They drove away together, probably heading to her apartment, the apartment I'd helped her find. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, unable to process what I'd just witnessed. This wasn't some random affair with a stranger. This was betrayal on a level I couldn't have imagined. My husband and my best friend, together while I cooked dinner and worried about our marriage and planned reunion parties. How long had this been going on? Had it started before she moved back, during one of their innocent text conversations? Had they been laughing about me, about how clueless I was, about how easy it was to fool the trusting wife? My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Working late again. Don't wait up. Love you." Love you. The words felt like acid in my throat. Another text, this one from Natasha. "Hope you and Thomas are having a good night. Can't wait for our lunch tomorrow. Miss you. Miss you." While she was probably in his car, heading to her bed, wearing the perfume I'd bought her for her birthday. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with memories that suddenly looked different. Thomas's enthusiasm when I mentioned Natasha was moving back, his sudden increase in work commitments. The way Natasha always seemed to know exactly what to say about my marriage problems, like she had inside information. Because she did have inside information. She was getting it directly from my husband. When I got home, I threw the salmon in the trash and poured myself a glass of wine with shaking hands. Then another, and another. By the time Thomas came home at 11:30, smelling like Natasha's perfume and making excuses about client dinners, I was sitting in our living room with a smile plastered on my face. "How was work, honey?" I asked sweetly. "Exhausting," he lied, kissing my forehead like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. As I watched him head upstairs to shower off the evidence of his betrayal, I realized that the woman who'd driven to his office with dinner was gone forever. In her place sat someone new. Someone who was going to make them both pay for what they'd done. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. While Thomas showered, humming like he didn't have a care in the world, I made coffee and toast, playing the role of the devoted wife one more time. But inside, my mind was working like a machine, cataloging every lie, every deception, every moment that suddenly made perfect sense. "I might be late again tonight," Thomas said, straightening his tie in the hallway mirror. "Big depositions coming up." "Of course, honey, I understand." I kissed his cheek, tasting the lie on his lips. "I'm having lunch with Natasha today. Should I tell her you said hello?" For just a split second, his hand froze on his briefcase handle. "Sure, tell her. Tell her I hope she's settling in well." The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I canceled all my meetings and began what I now think of as my real education. If Thomas and Natasha thought they could play me for a fool, they were about to learn how wrong they were. I started with our finances. Thomas handled most of our accounts, claiming it was easier since he understood legal contracts better. I'd trusted him completely, only checking our statements occasionally. Now I went through everything with a fine-tooth comb. What I found made my blood boil. Rosario's restaurant. Not once, but 7 times in the past 2 months. Each bill for 2 people, each costing more than I spent on groceries in a week. A jewelry store charge for $800 on the same day Natasha had shown me her new necklace from a client. Hotel charges in the city when Thomas claimed to be working late at the office. But the worst discovery was a recurring payment I'd never noticed before. $500 a month, every month for the past 6 months, going to something called Downtown Property Management, the same company that managed Natasha's building. My husband had been paying my best friend's rent. I sat in our kitchen, surrounded by bank statements and credit card bills, feeling like the biggest fool who ever lived. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind? My phone buzzed with a text from Natasha. "Can't wait for lunch. I have so much to tell you about this guy I've been seeing. He's amazing, but it's complicated." This guy she'd been seeing, my husband, and she was going to sit across from me and lie to my face about it. I met Natasha at our usual spot, a cute cafe downtown that was walking distance from her apartment. She looked radiant, practically glowing, wearing a silk blouse I'd never seen before that probably cost more than my car payment. "You look incredible," I told her, and I meant it. Betrayal suited her. "Thanks. I've been taking better care of myself lately. You know how it is when you meet someone special." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, but I think I'm falling in love." The audacity was breathtaking. She was going to make me ask for details about her affair with my own husband. "Tell me everything," I said, forcing excitement into my voice. "Well, he's older, more mature than guys I usually date. Successful, sophisticated. He makes me feel like a queen." She twisted the necklace at her throat, the $800 necklace my husband had bought her. "The only problem is, he's married." "Oh, Nat." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand, the same hand that had probably been all over my husband the night before. "That's so complicated." "I know it's wrong, but Victoria, I've never felt anything like this. He says his marriage has been over for years, that they're basically just roommates now. He's planning to leave her soon." Planning to leave me. The words hit like a physical blow, but I kept my expression sympathetic and concerned. "Are you sure he's telling the truth? I mean, married men say things like that all the time. This is different. He shows me pictures of their house, tells me about how cold and distant she is. He says she doesn't understand him like I do." Natasha's eyes were bright with conviction. "He even pays for my apartment because he wants to take care of me. Can you believe that?" I could believe it, because I'd seen the bank statements. "What's his name?" I asked casually. "I can't tell you that yet. He's worried about his reputation, his career. But maybe soon, when he's ready to make it official." For 2 hours, I sat there listening to my best friend describe her passionate affair with my husband, painting me as the cold, unloving wife who didn't deserve him. She told me about their romantic dinners, their weekend getaways, their plans for the future. She even asked for my advice on how to handle the guilt of being with a married man. "Do you think I'm a terrible person?" she asked as we prepared to leave. "Of course not," I lied smoothly. "Love is complicated. Sometimes these things just happen." That evening, I sat in my car outside Natasha's building and watched Thomas arrive at 7:30, carrying flowers and a bottle of wine. I watched him use his own key to let himself into her apartment. I watched the lights go on in her bedroom window, and I began to plan. They thought they were so clever, so careful. They had no idea that the woman they'd been deceiving was about to become their worst nightmare. They wanted to play games with my life, my marriage, my trust. Fine. But they were about to learn that I was much better at games than either of them had ever imagined. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook, a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, and a mind that was working clearer than it had in years. By sunrise, I had the skeleton of a plan that would make both Thomas and Natasha understand exactly what they'd destroyed. But I needed help, and surprisingly, it came from the most unexpected source. Mrs. Chen had lived next door for 15 years, ever since her husband died. She was the kind of neighbor who noticed everything. Which cars came and went, which lights stayed on too late, which couples fought loud enough to hear through the walls. I'd always been polite to her, but we'd never been close. That changed when I found her crying on her front porch the next morning. "Mrs. Chen, are you okay?" She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "My grandson called last night. His wife left him for his business partner. 23 years of marriage, gone because she wanted someone with more money." Something in her voice told me this wasn't just about her grandson. "I'm so sorry." Men like that, women like that, they think they can just take what they want from good people. They think there are no consequences. She wiped her eyes with a tissue. "My husband used to say that cheaters always get what's coming to them, but I'm not so sure anymore." I sat down beside her on the porch steps. "What if I told you that sometimes good people have to make their own consequences?" Mrs. Chen studied my face for a long moment. "I'd say, that sounds like someone who's been hurt badly." "My husband is having an affair," I said quietly, "with my best friend." The words hung in the morning air between us. Mrs. Chen reached over and patted my hand with surprising strength. "What do you need, dear?" Over the next hour, I told her everything. About the lies, the financial betrayal, the lunch where Natasha had described her affair while asking for my advice. Mrs. Chen listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of disgust. "So, what's your plan?" she asked when I finished. "I'm going to destroy them both. But I need to do it carefully, methodically. I need them to suffer the way they've made me suffer." Mrs. Chen smiled for the first time that morning. "I like you more than I thought, Victoria Sterling. What do you need from me?" The beauty of my plan was its simplicity. I wasn't going to confront them directly or make dramatic scenes. Instead, I was going to use what I knew about both of them, their fears, their insecurities, their secrets, to slowly drive them insane. Natasha had always been terrified of being alone. In college, she'd panic if she couldn't reach me or our other friends for more than a few hours. She needed constant validation, constant attention. She also had a deep fear of being watched, stemming from a stalker incident in high school that had left her paranoid about her safety. Thomas, on the other hand, was obsessed with his reputation and control. He needed to be seen as the perfect lawyer, the perfect husband, the perfect man. His greatest fear was public humiliation or losing control of any situation. I was going to use both of these weaknesses against them. Phase 1 started immediately. I began documenting everything, taking photos of Thomas leaving for his late meetings, recording the times he came home smelling like Natasha's perfume, saving every lie he told me in a detailed journal. I also started being the perfect wife again, cooking his favorite meals, asking about his day, being affectionate and loving. "You seem happier lately," Thomas commented one evening as I massaged his shoulders. "I've been thinking about our anniversary next month," I lied smoothly. "I want to plan something special, maybe renew our vows." The guilt that flashed across his face was delicious. "That sounds nice, honey." Meanwhile, I began my psychological campaign against Natasha. It started small, a few hang-up calls to her apartment, nothing traceable. Then I had Mrs. Chen, who was surprisingly good at disguising her voice, call Natasha's real estate office asking about the blonde agent who's been seen with married men around town. "Someone called my office today," Natasha told me during our weekly coffee date. "They said weird things about me dating married men. It was probably just a prank, but it made me nervous." "That's so strange," I said, stirring my latte. Maybe it was a jealous ex-girlfriend of your mystery man? Maybe. But how would anyone know about us? We've been so careful. Not careful enough, I thought, but I just nodded sympathetically. The real genius of my plan was that I was going to make them destroy each other. Natasha's paranoia would make her clingy and demanding. Thomas's need for control would make him pull away when she became too needy. I just had to create the right pressure points and watch their perfect affair crumble under the weight of their own character flaws. But the final phase, the piece de resistance, would be the package. The one that would contain something so perfectly calculated to destroy Natasha's sanity that she'd never recover from it. I spent weeks planning exactly what would go in that box, and when I finally figured it out, I smiled for the first time since discovering their betrayal. They thought they were playing games with an innocent, trusting wife. They had no idea they were about to face a woman who had nothing left to lose. The psychological warfare began in earnest 3 weeks before I planned to send the package. I had become a master of deception, playing the loving wife while systematically dismantling their perfect little affair from the shadows. Mrs. Chen turned out to be a natural at this game. I should have been a spy, she told me one afternoon as we reviewed our progress. This is the most fun I've had since Harold died. Phase 1 was working beautifully. Thomas was becoming increasingly paranoid about maintaining his double life. I'd started asking innocent questions that made him sweat, wondering aloud about his late nights, suggesting we surprise him at the office with dinner, mentioning how I'd love to meet his new colleagues he was supposedly working with. "You're being awfully curious about my work lately," he said one evening, his voice tight with suspicion. "I just miss spending time with you," I replied, kissing his cheek. "I feel like we never talk anymore." The guilt was eating him alive, exactly as I'd planned. He'd started bringing me flowers randomly, being extra affectionate, overcompensating for his betrayal in ways that made my skin crawl. But it was Natasha who was really starting to crack. The hang-up calls had escalated. Mrs. Chen would call at different times, sometimes early morning, sometimes late at night, and just breathe into the phone before hanging up. Nothing threatening, nothing that could be traced back to us, but enough to make Natasha constantly on edge. "I think someone's watching me," she confided during one of our coffee dates. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes that even expensive concealer couldn't hide. "I keep getting these weird calls, and yesterday I swear I saw the same car parked outside my building 3 times. The car had been Mrs. Chen's nephew, who owed his grandmother a favor and didn't ask questions. But Natasha didn't need to know that. "Have you told the police?" I asked, playing the concerned friend perfectly. "What would I tell them? That I'm getting hang-up calls and seeing cars? They'd think I'm crazy." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she was trying to warm herself. "Maybe I am going crazy." "Don't say that. You're just stressed. How are things going with your mystery man?" Her face darkened. "That's part of the problem. He's been distant lately, distracted. I think his wife might be getting suspicious." Perfect. Thomas was pulling away just as I'd predicted. The pressure I was putting on him at home was making him less available for romantic dinners and secret getaways. Natasha's increasing neediness was probably driving him crazy. "Maybe you should give him some space," I suggested. "Let him handle things with his wife." "But what if he changes his mind? What if he decides to stay with her?" The desperation in her voice was music to my ears. "I've given up everything for him, Victoria. I moved back here. I've been living this secret life. If he leaves me now..." She didn't finish the sentence, but I could see the fear in her eyes. Natasha had always been terrified of abandonment, and I was systematically triggering every insecurity she'd ever had. The next phase involved her apartment. Mrs. Chen had a friend who worked for the building's maintenance company. For $50, he was willing to let us know when Natasha would be out for extended periods. We never broke in, never did anything illegal. But we didn't need to. The building had thin walls, and Mrs. Chen's friend mentioned that the unit above Natasha's had been vacant for months. It was easy enough to arrange for some maintenance work that involved moving furniture around at odd hours, creating footsteps and bumping sounds that would filter down to Natasha's apartment. "I think someone's living in the apartment above me," she told me frantically over the phone one night. "I hear footsteps, furniture moving, but the building manager says it's empty." "That's really strange," I said, sitting in my comfortable living room while my husband showered off the scent of her perfume. "Maybe it's just the building settling." "Buildings don't settle in patterns, Victoria. Someone is up there and they're doing it on purpose." The The paranoia was spreading through her like poison. She'd started calling Thomas more frequently, demanding more of his time, asking him to stay over more often. But Thomas was feeling the pressure from both sides now. Me at home asking questions, and Natasha becoming increasingly clingy and demanding. Their perfect affair was becoming a nightmare for both of them. The final straw came when I had Mrs. Chen's nephew follow Natasha to the grocery store and accidentally bump into her in the parking lot. "Excuse me," he'd said politely. "Aren't you the woman who's been seeing Thomas Sterling?" Then he'd walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing there in shock. That night, Natasha called Thomas in a panic. I know because I was listening on the extension in our bedroom while Thomas took the call in his study. "Someone knows about us," she whispered frantically. "A stranger approached me today. He knew your name, Thomas. How could he know your name?" "Calm down," Thomas said, but I could hear the fear in his voice. "You're being paranoid." "I'm not being paranoid. Someone is watching me, following me, calling me. And now they know about us. What if they tell your wife?" "No one's going to tell Victoria anything," Thomas said firmly. "You're imagining things." But I could hear the doubt creeping into his voice. The perfect, controlled Thomas Sterling was starting to crack under the pressure. It was time for the final phase. Time to send the package that would destroy them both completely. As I hung up the phone and listened to Thomas pace in his study, I smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow, I would prepare the package that would make Natasha scream, loud enough to wake the entire neighborhood. The package arrived at Natasha's door at exactly 8:45 a.m. on that Tuesday morning, just as I'd planned. Inside the carefully wrapped box were 3 items that would destroy her completely: a USB drive, a manila envelope, and something that would trigger her deepest childhood trauma. But let me start with what happened the night before, because Thomas got his share of the payback too. I'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, and Monday evening was when I finally revealed my hand to my cheating husband. Thomas came home at his usual time, expecting another night of lies and deception. Instead, he found me sitting in our living room with a glass of wine and a laptop open on the coffee table. "Hey, honey," he said, loosening his tie. "How was your day?" "Enlightening," I replied calmly. "Sit down, Thomas. We need to talk." Something in my tone made him freeze. "What's wrong?" "I know about Natasha." The color drained from his face. For a moment, he looked like he might deny it, but then he saw the laptop screen. I'd compiled everything: bank statements, restaurant receipts, hotel charges, photos I'd taken of him entering her building. 8 months of evidence laid out in perfect chronological order. "Victoria, I can explain." "No need. I know everything. The rent payments, the jewelry, the lies about working late. I even know about your plans to divorce me on our anniversary." I took a sip of wine, savoring his shock. "Did you really think I was that stupid?" Thomas sank into his chair, his perfect composure finally cracking. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to plan accordingly." I closed the laptop and smiled at him. "You see, while you and my best friend were playing house, I've been busy too. Tomorrow morning, Natasha is going to receive a very special package, and you, my dear husband, are going to watch your perfect little affair explode in the most spectacular way possible." "What did you do?" His voice was barely a whisper. "I did what you should have expected from someone you've known for 12 years. I fought back." I stood up, smoothing my dress. "Oh, and Thomas, pack a bag. You'll be staying at a hotel tonight. I've already changed the locks." The panic in his eyes was beautiful. "Victoria, please, we can work this out. I'll end things with Natasha. We can go to counseling." "Too late for that. You made your choice when you decided she was worth losing everything for. Well, congratulations. You're about to lose everything." I handed him a manila envelope. "Divorce papers. I'm keeping the house, half your assets, and your dignity. My lawyer will be in touch." Thomas opened the envelope with shaking hands. "You can't do this. I'll fight you." "With what? The evidence of your affair that I'm planning to share with your law firm's partners? The financial records showing you've been stealing from our joint accounts to pay for your mistress? The photos of you entering her apartment?" I laughed softly. "Please fight me. I'd love to see you try." That's when I told him about the package. "Right now, Natasha is sleeping peacefully in the apartment you pay for, wearing the jewelry you bought her, dreaming about your future together. But tomorrow morning, she's going to discover some very interesting things about the man she's been sleeping with. What kind of things? Well, for starters, she's going to see every text message you've ever sent me complaining about her. Remember when you called her clingy and desperate after she wanted to spend the weekend together? Or when you said her constant need for validation was exhausting? I saved all of those. Thomas's face went white. You wouldn't. Oh, but I would. She's also going to see the photos you took of her sleeping and sent to your college buddies, bragging about your hot young mistress. And the voice recording where you told your brother that you were just using her for sex until you got bored. None of this was true, but Thomas was too panicked to think clearly. The guilt and paranoia I'd been building up for weeks made him believe he might have actually done these things. But the real masterpiece, I continued, is the fake pregnancy test. What? Natasha's greatest fear, besides being abandoned, is getting pregnant and being left alone. So I've included a positive pregnancy test with a note supposedly from her doctor, along with medical records showing that you've been secretly getting vasectomy consultations because you never want children with her. Thomas looked like he was going to be sick. She'll know it's fake. Will she? In her current paranoid state, after weeks of feeling watched and followed, after you've been pulling away from her, she's going to believe every word. The beauty of my plan was that it would destroy them both. Natasha would be devastated by the betrayal, and Thomas would have to deal with her complete emotional breakdown. Their perfect affair would become a nightmare of accusations, tears, and mutual destruction. And that's exactly what happened. The next morning, as Natasha's screams echoed through Maple Street, I sat in my car watching the chaos unfold. The paramedics arrived, the police came to investigate, and Thomas got the phone call that would haunt him forever. She's in the hospital, he told me later, his voice broken. Psychiatric hold. She tried to hurt herself after opening the package. I felt a moment of genuine shock. I'd wanted to destroy her, but I hadn't expected it to go that far. The police want to question me about the package, Thomas continued. They think it might be connected to the stalking she's been reporting. And is it? I asked innocently. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. He looked at me with something that might have been respect mixed with terror. You really did it. You destroyed us both. No, Thomas. You destroyed yourselves.